Have you ever, just looked around at your family or maybe your neighborhood or even just your own life and felt this profound, unshakable sense that you just dropped into the middle of a story where you do not fit at all?
Oh, absolutely. Like you are an extra on the wrong movie set or something.
Exactly. Picture yourself sitting at a dinner table. You are surrounded by people who share your last name,
Hmm.
maybe even your eye color.
Right.
And yet this quiet, terrifying thought creeps into your mind like, how did I end up here? These are definitely not my people.
It is such a jarring sensation. And we are not just talking about ordinary loneliness here or, the typical teenage angst of feeling misunderstood.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a fundamental existential alienation, a feeling that your very presence in a specific environment is, well, basically a clerical error made by the
A
universe.
clerical error. I love that phrasing. And when that feeling takes root in early childhood, it fundamentally rewrites how a human being constructs their sense of reality.
It really does. It changes the entire foundation.
And that terrifying, quiet thought is the beating heart of our deep dive today. So welcome, everyone. We are embarking on a brand new mission.
I'm so excited for this one.
Same here. Today, we are unpacking the intricate, soulful, and deeply reflective opening of author Blaize book, Lost, Alone, and Afraid.
Which is such a powerful read.
It really is. And to give you, the listener, the architectural layout of this book, the author utilizes what she calls the 369 method.
Right. The structure is very intentional.
Exactly. The entire memoir is meticulously structured into 9 distinct chapters. However, today, we are placing our magnifying glass exclusively on Chapter 1, which is titled Sent from Heaven.
And honestly, framing this solely as a memoir actually does it a bit of a disservice, I think.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it reads much more like a forensic investigation into mental wellness, early childhood trauma, and spiritual growth.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the objective of this first chapter is to trace the origins of a soul desperately trying to find its footing on a pretty hostile earth.
Wow, yeah. We are basically observing a child, starting from infancy, attempting to process massive cosmological questions about her own existence just to survive her daily life.
Exactly. And the sensory storytelling is what immediately pulled me in. You can practically feel the humidity of her childhood neighborhood.
Oh, for sure. The heat radiating off the concrete. But woven into these vivid tactile memories are these towering philosophical debates, which is wild for a child's perspective.
It is. She doesn't just describe her trauma, she interrogates the universe to figure out why the trauma exists in the first place.
Right, and that structural choice is deliberate. By laying the psychological and spiritual foundation early, she gives us the cipher to understand her subsequent survival mechanisms.
That is a great way to put it. Because when a child experiences an acute lack of connection and early trauma, their internal world becomes their primary shelter.
Because the physical world is unsafe.
Precisely. The physical world is unsafe, so the mind builds a fortress out of theology, philosophy, and intense observation.
So, if she concludes early on that she doesn't belong to her earthly family, where does she look?
She has to look to the cosmos.
Right. She bypasses the physical earth entirely to begin her story. We are heading straight into the spiritual realm, basically the cosmic waiting room.
Yeah, she initiates this incredibly rigorous exploration of the philosophy of the soul, which is a brilliant pivot, honestly.
It really is. If her earthly origins cause her pain, she must investigate her spiritual origins.
She asks the fundamental question, when someone is born, what is the default setting of their soul? Is it inherently good? Is it irrevocably bad? Or is it completely neutral?
And she doesn't just ponder this rhetorically either. She goes deep into the research.
Oh, she goes so deep.
She presents 3 distinct philosophical categories to the reader, effectively auditing centuries of human thought to diagnose her own starting point.
We really need to unpack these 3 categories because they form the lens through which she views every interaction in her childhood.
Let's do it. What is the first one?
So, the first category she scrutinizes is the concept of the soul arriving not good. In theological terms, this is often classified as inherited sin or original sin.
Right, which is a dominant framework in many traditions, particularly within Catholicism and various Protestant denominations.
Exactly. The core mechanism of that view is that humanity possesses a fallen, fractured nature from the very moment of conception.
She specifically points to the text of Psalm 51.5 for this, right?
Yes, which suggests a sin nature is present before a person even takes their first breath.
Wow. So in this framework, You aren't flawed because of what you do, you are flawed because of what you are.
Yes, and consider the psychological weight of that idea on a child already experiencing neglect or trauma.
That would be crushing.
It is, because if the default setting is not good, then the harshness of the world is almost justified. The trauma feels like a natural consequence of a corrupted state.
But she contrasts this heavily with the second category, which is the neutral soul.
Right, the blank slate, or tabula rasa.
This takes the debate out of the church and drops it squarely into the realm of secular philosophy and psychology.
You have Aristotle, John Locke, and later Sigmund Freud, all arguing that a newborn's moral character is entirely unwritten.
Under the tabula rasa theory, a child is an empty vessel. Every ounce of moral character, every behavioral instinct is written onto that slate by the environment.
By the environment, by experience, and by the nurturing or the lack thereof provided by caregivers.
Let's just pause and look at the terrifying implications of the blank slate theory for a trauma survivor.
It is actually quite scary when you think about it.
I like to think of a child's mind as a freshly formatted hard drive. If the blank slate theory is true, that means the child absorbs whatever operating system their environment installs.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. So if they are born into a toxic, abusive, or neglectful home, the environment holds the pen. The abusers basically write the code.
Which would mean she absorbs the toxic environment around her. She essentially becomes the trauma.
And that is precisely the existential dread she is wrestling with. If she is a blank slate, she has no innate defenses.
None at all. She is entirely at the mercy of the people she already knows she doesn't fit in with.
This is exactly why the third perspective becomes her absolute lifeline. The soul is born good, or the concept of innate virtue.
Yeah, she brings in philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Mencius here.
What was their main argument?
They argued vehemently that humans are naturally pure, empathetic, and gentle. The corruption comes later.
So we start off with an inherent goodness, and it is the friction with broken societies and dysfunctional institutions that degrades us.
Exactly. She even pulls in modern developmental psychology, pointing to studies where infants exhibit instinctive altruistic behaviors.
This is where we see her construct what is essentially a psychological hazmat suit.
A hazmat suit. I like that.
Yeah, because the innate virtue theory provides a protective barrier. It allows her to walk through a radioactive childhood environment without believing she is fundamentally radioactive herself.
Oh, that is so insightful. If her soul was born good, she has an internal, untainted core that her environment simply cannot touch.
Let's take that hazmat suit analogy further, Her very title, Sent from Heaven, tells us she completely rejects the blank slate.
She absolutely does.
She believes she arrived with a pre-installed divine operating system of goodness. Her environment might be throwing radiation at her, but her suit was forged somewhere else entirely.
It is such a profound act of psychological preservation, and once she establishes what kind of soul she has, she turns her analytical mind to when that soul actually arrived.
Which takes us to ensoulment.
Yes, she dives into the concept of ensoulment, mapping out 4 distinct viewpoints on the timeline of human spiritual inception.
The sheer scope of her research here is staggering for a memoir. It really is.
It is incredibly dense.
The first viewpoint she details is ensoulment at the moment of conception. The idea that the instant unique genetic material fuses, a soul is anchored to the physical world.
She notes this is the official stance of the Roman Catholic Church, right?
Yeah, and it also appears in certain Eastern philosophies regarding reincarnation, where a wandering soul is magnetically drawn to those uniting cells.
The psychological implication of the conception theory is total integration. The physical body and the spiritual self grow concurrently.
But she also explores the second viewpoint, which pushes the timeline to 40 or 120 days of fetal development.
Yes. This is historically tied to the quickening, which is the first detectable movements of the fetus.
Right. She references Islamic scholars who point to 120 days based on the Hadith, and she looks at the Talmud in Judaism, which cites 40 days as a pivotal time of formation.
It is amazing how much ground she covers. Even Aristotle, with his early biological observations, tied ensoulment to this 40 to 90-day window.
So in this framework, the physical vessel is prepared first, and the soul is implanted into a somewhat developed host.
Yes. And then we arrive at the third view, which fundamentally shifts the timeline to the moment of birth, specifically the very first breath.
This view is deeply anchored in the Genesis narrative, where the breath of life is blown into the physical form of Adam.
Right. And in many Jewish traditions, the soul is fully received when the infant takes that shocking first gasp of air.
She also brings in Hindu astrology here, noting that the exact moment of physical delivery is considered the soul's definitive start on Earth, which dictates the astrological charts.
Imagine the poetry of that third view for someone who feels so alienated.
What do you mean?
Well, the soul hovers, waiting, and only tethers itself to the body at the moment the child is forcefully pushed into the blinding reality of the world.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly poetic. Finally, she examines the fourth perspective, which is ensoulment in stages.
The gradual arrival.
Yeah, she studies Kabbalistic Judaism, which
Mhm.
posits that the highest, most complex spiritual parts of the soul enter in phases.
And often not completing the process until the child reaches the age of 12 or 13, right?
Exactly. And she pairs this ancient mysticism with modern scientific perspectives that view consciousness not as a sudden spark, but as an emergent property of a developing complex brain network.
So why does she spend so much time on this timeline?
That is the big question.
Because a mind relentless in trying to understand its own inception is a mind trying to find a reason for its own pain.
Wow.
By laying out these four timelines, she is building an architectural framework to justify her feeling that she is not of this world.
She is essentially proving to herself that the soul is a distinct, measurable entity separate from the family she was born into.
And that distinction is vital. It creates the logical bridge to her next major concept, which is spiritual DNA and the Great Separation.
Right, because if the soul comes from somewhere else and has its own distinct timeline, it doesn't arrive by accident.
She leans heavily into the idea of predestination. She believes we arrive on Earth equipped with a highly specific spiritual DNA.
Now, this requires us to impartially examine the religious texts she uses to frame her survival.
Yes, and we must explicitly remind you, the listener, that we are analyzing how the author employs theology as a cognitive tool for mental wellness.
Exactly. We are impartially reporting on her use of these ancient concepts, observing their psychological utility without endorsing any specific religious doctrine.
Our focus is strictly on the mechanism of her belief.
Right, so she dedicates a massive portion of chapter 1 to dissecting the King James Version of the Bible, zeroing in on the Great Separation prophesied at the end of the world.
She brings several heavy parables to the table to illustrate a universe where outcomes are predetermined.
Let's analyze the specific mechanism of the parables she selects from the Gospel of Matthew. The most prominent is the wheat and the tares.
In this agricultural narrative, a farmer plants good wheat, but an enemy sneaks in at night and plants tares, which are weeds that visually mimic wheat right alongside the good crop.
And when the servants ask if they should rip up the weeds, the farmer says no.
Right, because pulling the weeds might damage the wheat. Both must grow together until the harvest.
At which point, the reapers will separate the tares for burning and gather the wheat into safety.
She layers this with other parables of division, too. The separation of the sheep and the goats.
Oh, and the net cast into the sea that drags up a chaotic mix of good and bad fish, which are only sorted once they reach the shore.
Yes. And the imagery of the fan in his hand used to violently separate the wheat from the useless chaff on the threshing floor.
Every single one of these stories points to a universe designed for ultimate, unavoidable division.
She connects these narratives of division with verses about divine foreknowledge.
Like Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, where she quotes, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee."
Exactly. She contrasts this divine familiarity with the concept of the two lineages, the stark biblical division between the children of God and the children of the devil.
She is meticulously painting a picture of a spiritual ecosystem where your lineage, your ultimate fate, is hardwired before you ever arrive.
Okay, but I have to push back here, because this concept of predestination creates a massive philosophical knot.
What do you mean?
Well, if we are already sorted, if a person is a weed or wheat before they even break through the soil, what is the point of the human experience?
That is a fair point.
Where does free will factor into a system where the harvest is predetermined?
And the tension between predestination and free will is one of the most volatile debates in human history.
How can humans be held morally responsible if their spiritual DNA was pre-coded by the divine?
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
If you tell a 5-year-old child that some people are just naturally tares, destined for destruction, and some are wheat, doesn't that breed a kind of spiritual apathy?
You would think so.
Why should she try to be good if the Sorting Hat has already made its decision before time began?
Because of the specific psychological release valve this theology offers her. Look at the mechanism of her logic.
How does she rationalize it?
She explicitly writes, "It's not our job to do the sorting right now. We're just called to grow and stay faithful."
Okay, so she uses the paradox of predestination not to induce apathy, but to surrender the burden of judgment.
Wait, walk me through that. How does predestination remove the burden of judgment?
Imagine being a highly empathetic child in a deeply dysfunctional, maybe toxic environment. Your natural instinct is to try and fix the people around you.
To understand why they are hurting you or to change their behavior.
Right, and that is a crushing, impossible weight for a child. It destroys them.
It really does.
But if you believe that the Ancient of Days already knows everyone's spiritual DNA, that he is not surprised by the cruelty or dysfunction of the tares, you are suddenly freed from the responsibility of trying to turn a weed into wheat.
Oh, the clarity of that defense mechanism is astounding.
Isn't it?
She is looking at the chaos around her and saying, I do not have to fix these people. I do not have to absorb their toxicity.
The universe has already categorized them. My only job is to focus on my own sunlight, my own soil, and grow.
It allows her to detach with extreme prejudice while maintaining her own empathy. It is the ultimate boundary setting.
She acknowledges the divine timeline. If the outcome is already known, her journey isn't an anxiety-ridden test to prove she is weak.
It is an ongoing process of becoming the wheat she was always designed to be.
That reframes the entire earthly experience for her. She isn't a blank slate waiting to be corrupted. She is a seed with an unstoppable genetic imperative to grow, regardless of the weeds surrounding her.
Having established this ironclad spiritual blueprint, the text transitions sharply from the cosmos down to the concrete.
We finally have to look at her literal physical arrival on Earth.
The author provides a visceral, rhythmic poem to document this transition, and the imagery she uses to describe birth is not joyful or gentle.
No, it is deeply traumatic. She writes of trading a velvet sea and the ink of time for a sudden tear and the blinding morning sun.
The language implies a forced eviction. She writes, she carries the weight of 1,000 years, a traveler shedding forgotten fears.
She views her infant self as an ancient, exhausted entity, squeezing through a terrifying, narrow tunnel into a harsh physical reality.
The biological shock of birth mirrors her psychological shock. The alienation sets in almost instantly.
By the age of 5, this profound sense of displacement reaches a boiling point. She details having active, desperate conversations with God.
Picture a 5-year-old child sitting alone, looking up and demanding of the universe, why am I here on Earth? What is my purpose?
She describes feeling distinctly odd. She looked at her family members, observed their behaviors, their speech patterns, their values,
and concluded with chilling certainty, I was placed in the wrong family.
This internal turmoil manifests physically. She experiences severe panic and anxiety attacks long before she possessed the vocabulary to articulate what mental health even was.
Her young, developing nervous system was completely overloaded by the cognitive dissonance of possessing a good soul in an environment that felt fundamentally misaligned with her nature.
Without a therapist, without an adult to guide her through this visceral panic, she searches her environment for an anchor.
And she finds her first mantra printed on a cheap wall plaque in her room.
It depicted a little girl and bore the phrase, I know I'm special because God doesn't make junk.
The psychological instinct displayed here is phenomenal. A child experiencing severe physiological dysregulation instinctively grabs hold of a cognitive behavioral tool.
She repeats this phrase endlessly, utilizing it to consciously regulate her breathing during panic attacks.
It is a profound application of the hazmat suit theory we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The world makes her feel like discarded junk, like a mistake. So she uses a theological absolute to override her physical panic.
She also memorizes the 23rd Psalm, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Yeah. Those weren't just verses to recite in Sunday school. For a child feeling adrift, the idea of a cosmic shepherd provides the ultimate attachment figure.
When her physical caregivers felt emotionally distant, or her environment felt, as she describes it, harsh and cold, the psalm offered a tangible tether to a warm, unconditionally safe presence.
To truly grasp the necessity of that tether, we have to examine the environment she was surviving.
Right. The deep dive shifts our focus to the South City housing projects.
Her observations of this world are razor sharp. She catalogs her reality with the precision of a frontline journalist.
She offers us two highly evocative childhood memories that perfectly encapsulate her struggle for autonomy and safety in South City.
The first memory takes place on the 4th of July.
The sensory details in this scene are suffocating in their intensity. It is the grand finale of the neighborhood fireworks.
The air is thick with the acrid smell of sulfur, mixing with the smoke of charred burgers on the grill.
Older cousins are sprinting wildly across the lawn, chasing ground blooms that spin and spark unpredictably.
And the adults are loud, cheering, completely distracted by the chaos.
But in the midst of this overwhelming macro chaos, where is our author?
She is hidden away, crouched behind the front tire of a parked sedan, swallowed by the shadows.
But she is not abandoned in the dark. She is being fiercely held by a young guardian.
Small, steady arms pull her into a makeshift fortress of soft cotton.
With every concussive boom that shakes the pavement, the embrace tightens. A hand reaches up to cup her ear, physically muffling the explosive sounds of the sky.
The contrast here is structurally vital. You have the spectacular, dangerous frenzy of the external world, juxtaposed against a microenvironment of absolute safety.
The rhythmic, soothing shushing against the top of her head acts as a counterfrequency to the fireworks.
We see the quiet, fierce devotion of a slightly older child taking on the mantle of protector for someone even smaller.
Picture yourself at that chaotic party. You, along with all the adults, are looking up. You are mesmerized by the cascading violet and gold light painting the smoke in the sky.
But the true significance of the night, the profound, invisible act of pure love, is happening down in the dirt behind a car tire.
Yet, notice the author's internal monologue even in this cocoon of safety. As the guardian carries her away from the smoke, she notes feeling infinitesimally small in a world that feels unmanageably vast.
Her prevailing thought is still, where am I? The safety of the embrace does not cure the underlying existential displacement.
And that relentless drive to find her place in the world propels us into the second memory, the great pursuit.
She is no longer hiding. She is a baby strapped into a walker, sitting on the sun-baked concrete of the South City projects.
She ignores the stray Cheerios scattered on her plastic tray. Her attention is locked onto the giants.
The elementary school boys. They are trudging home, their heavy backpacks slung over their shoulders, moving with purpose.
They represent the forward momentum of life, the parade that she is excluded from.
What is her response to this exclusion? She plants her tiny toes firmly onto the rough concrete and unleashes a mighty shove.
The sound is highly specific, right? Scratch, scratch, slide. Her legs become a blur of motion. She is determined to catch the giants.
But the adults on the porch, observing this display of ambition, do not offer encouragement. They mock her.
Her aunt bursts into laughter, teasing her futile effort.
Her mother yells out from the porch that those boys are 10 years and a mountain of homework ahead of her.
The adults treat it as a comedy routine like, they're a little too old for you, kiddo. You haven't even mastered the nap yet.
It is gentle teasing, but it highlights a massive chasm between her internal drive and her external reality.
She burns with an absolute need to belong, to join the progression of the world, yet she is physically trapped by the plastic and metal of a baby walker.
And intellectually dismissed by the adults around her.
She shoots the adults on the porch a look of pure defiance, a look that screams, just you wait until I get my own backpack.
It is the first spark of a sheer, stubborn autonomy. As she transitions from a baby in a walker to a highly observant preschooler, her intellect becomes her primary tool for navigating her chaotic tribe.
This cognitive agility is brilliantly showcased in an incident we can call the Great Honey Bun Heist.
Oh, I love this story.
It perfectly illustrates how she learns to map the rules of her environment and exploit them for survival.
The setting is a neighborhood park, a sensory swirl of primary-colored playground equipment and grass-stained knees.
Another little girl approaches her, offering a piece of a sticky, glazed honey bun.
Our author accepts the offering and takes a massive bite, feeling victorious.
Instantly, an authority figure descends. Her mother's younger sister swoops in, clearly agitated, and delivers a harsh reprimand.
The aunt establishes a firm, non-negotiable rule of conduct. You don't just take food from people. If you want something, all you have to do is open up your mouth and ask me for it.
The timing of the universe in this moment is purely cinematic.
The aunt has barely finished her lecture on the mechanics of just asking when the ultimate symbol of neighborhood joy rolls up.
The beep-beep truck.
Yes, the local snack vendor arrives, loaded with treats, freezing every child in the park in their tracks.
Let's analyze the processing speed of the author's mind here. She wipes the stolen honey bun crumbs from her mouth, looks her scolding aunt squarely in the eye.
And executes the newly established law perfectly. She opens her mouth and says, "Can I have something from the beep beep truck?"
It is staggering cognitive flexibility. She absorbed a reprimand, isolated the technical loophole within the rule, and deployed it against the rulemaker in under 60 seconds.
She lawyered her aunt.
She totally did. The aunt's friend immediately recognizes the brilliance of the maneuver and bursts into laughter.
The aunt, trapped by her own phrasing, lets out a defeated sigh. She explicitly instructed the child to just ask, and the child complied flawlessly.
The aunt is basically forced to buy the snack.
The author makes a brilliant observation here that a snack procured through a legally binding loophole tastes infinitely sweeter than a stolen honey bun.
While this story is humorous, it demonstrates a hypervigilant child mapping the boundaries of her world.
If the adults operate on specific rules, she will master those rules to ensure her needs are met.
If the honey bun heist reveals her tactical survival skills, the subsequent memory reveals her desperate need for emotional validation.
We move from the park to the most sacred space in her early childhood.
Her maternal grandmother's dining room.
This is the setting for the Channel 5 News evening briefing. The sensory architecture of this room is vital.
The rhythmic, soothing hum-click-whir of her grandmother's sewing machine dictates the heartbeat of the house.
Rivers of colorful fabric are draped across the table, and right in the center of it all, perched on her grandmother's lap, sits the author.
That chair functioned as a throne. More importantly, it functioned as the only place where she possessed total visibility.
Her grandmother would pause her work and ask the defining question. "So, Sugar, tell me, how was your day?"
This was not an invitation for a simple summary. This was a prompt for a full investigative news broadcast.
The author would deliver the lead story with journalistic precision, like who dared to walk past the front porch and the specific color of their socks.
She provided breaking news regarding the distribution of household resources, specifically which aunt had selfishly consumed the good snacks.
She offered deep-dive investigative reporting into the minute-by-minute play-calling of various family disputes.
The aunts and uncles would gather around this performance, leaning against doorways, highly amused.
They would tease her, announcing, "The news reporter is on the air. What's the top story today, Channel 5?
She ignored the teasing entirely because the mockery didn't matter. She had secured an audience.
But crucially, the primary audience, her grandmother, never mocked her. The grandmother validated the broadcast.
She would nod rhythmically with the sewing machine, murmuring, "Is that right? Tell me more."
Think about the mechanics of your own childhood. Who was the specific individual who made you feel completely indomitable?
Who provided your safest press room?
Because for this author, tucked into the scent of peppermint and hot fabric starch, she was entirely insulated from her existential dread.
She was seen, she was heard, she had purpose.
The mood of the house shifts dramatically when her mother returns from her shift at the King's store.
The author perfectly captures the olfactory change in the air. The scent of brown paper bags, burning incense, and freshly printed newspapers sweeps into the room.
The mother demands the final edition of the news before bath time.
The author happily complies, delivering a ruthless stock report on the fluctuating contents of the cookie jar.
And a detailed personnel file outlining exactly which aunt had been excessively bossy that afternoon.
The mother, exasperated by the detailed snitching, asks the grandmother how she manages to get any sewing done with the child constantly chattering.
The grandmother's response is the ultimate validation of the child's existence. "I get the best stories in the neighborhood without ever having to leave my chair."
In that singular moment, the family ecosystem achieves perfect, harmonious integration.
As her mother carries her away to the bath, the author feels the immense satisfaction of a celebrity concluding a highly successful press conference.
She had performed her duty. The universe was momentarily balanced.
We have spent an hour meticulously detailing the construction of a safe, vibrant, localized world.
She utilized philosophy to shield her soul, she utilized loopholes to gain autonomy, and she utilized the evening briefing to secure emotional validation.
But the tragedy of Chapter 1 is that this intricate fortress of safety was always temporary.
The foundation begins to splinter. The mother decides she is no longer comfortable with her child acting as the grandmother's personal surveillance system.
The daily reports are causing too much friction.
So the disruption initiates. They move out of the grandmother's house.
They relocate to a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a complex known as Briarwood Manor, situated in an area called 4 Points.
They're still on the south side, just further out. It is a tremor, a destabilization of her routine, but she still has a geographic tether to her origins.
But a tremor usually precedes an earthquake. The catastrophic tectonic shift occurs when the author turns 4 years old.
Her father returns from serving in the army. The fragile, matriarchal ecosystem she has learned to navigate is suddenly obliterated.
The parents make a sweeping, unilateral decision. They pack up the newly reunited family of four: mother, father, the author, and her younger sister, and they completely abandon northern Florida.
They drive south, relocating the entire family to Central Florida.
Consider the psychological whiplash. Everything she mapped is suddenly erased.
The rhythmic hum of the sewing machine is silenced. The beep-beep truck no longer drives down her street.
The ants laughing on the porch, the protective cocoon behind the car tire, the absolute safety of her grandmother's lap, it is all gone.
She is violently plunged into an alien landscape. They move into a predominantly white neighborhood in Central Florida.
Fundamentally altering the demographic and cultural reflections she was accustomed to seeing.
The sensory input of her entire world has been overwritten without her consent.
Every single survival tool she meticulously crafted in South City, the investigative reporting, the manipulation of neighborhood loopholes, the localized tether of her extended tribe, is rendered completely useless in this sterile new environment.
She is functionally back to zero.
The author provides us with a chilling snapshot of her internal monologue during this displacement. It captures the absolute, suffocating terror of a child stripped of her context.
She stands in this new place and thinks, where am I? Where have they taken me? What is this place? I don't feel as if I belong here.
The cosmic alienation she felt staring at her family at the dinner table has now manifested geographically.
The universe has physically validated her deepest fear. She truly is a stranger in a strange land.
And that leaves us with a profound, lingering question for you to analyze. When a human being is suddenly and completely stripped of their physical home, when their tribe is severed, when the only people who make them feel visible vanish,
what happens to the architecture of their soul?
does the psychological hazmat suit crack under the immense, crushing pressure of total isolation? Or does the soul remember, even while standing in the darkest, most unfamiliar void, that it was sent from heaven?
The existential waters we waded into at the beginning of this deep dive are about to become a raging ocean. The philosophical theories are over, and the brutal test of her endurance is about to begin.
You'll have to discover exactly how her pre-installed divine operating system handles this catastrophic system crash in the next segment of her journey.
We are leaving you right here, stranded on the precipice of Chapter 2, which is titled A Long Way from Home.
Keep seeking the light, keep questioning your origins, and we will see you on the next deep dive.